Hello, dear friends. Greg Koukl, the host of this show, which is called Stand to Reason, and 33 years running now, broadcasting, though not always as Stand to Reason. I think that started about 29 years ago. And we are approaching, actually, our 29th anniversary coming up in a month, May 1st. So that's pretty cool. We're thrilled about that. It just has been greased lightning, though, when I think about the time. And people have asked me oftentimes on interviews that I do, and I do a frequent number, and they're easy to do now because there's Zoom things or StreamYard or something like that. And so they asked me about the founding of Stand to Reason, and did you ever think it would be what it is? And the answer is always no. I never, ever thought we would be here where we're at. It's just amazing to me what God has done. My motif has always been to bloom where I was planted. Whatever I could do in the place that I was at, I did. Even getting on the radio was kind of an accident. And I might have mentioned this to you in the past, but the first church whose threshold I crossed as a new Christian was Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And I had become a Christian on September 28, 1973. It was a Friday night, and 2 weeks later on Friday night, I was at this conference. It wasn't a conference, actually. It was a concert, because that was the big deal. You have a concert, Christian music, and then you had a speaker, Tom Stipe or somebody like that. There was a whole slew of these wonderful Calvary Chapel speakers that went on to become pastors all over the country and have big churches. Mike McIntosh in San Diego, for example, and others. And after the seminar, or rather, I'm sorry, after the talk, the evangelistic talk, they do an altar call and people would come forward. It was amazing. Well, that building is the exact same building where for the last 6 years we've been packing it out to the gills with realities. Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. In fact, the largest group we had was 2019 before COVID, and there were close to 2,700 people in that building. Now, when I went there in 1973, the building held 2,000, just like it does now, and it wasn't chock full. Now we have it overflowing into other areas, and 2,700 students, the same building that I walked into as a brand new Christian, now filled with Stand to Reason people at a Stand to Reason conference. And it has been done for a number of years. It's awesome. It's unbelievable. And I honestly can say I'm not tempted to take credit for that. Like this is my operation. I've been along for the ride. I have had a tiger by the tail for almost 29 years, and I don't know, maybe when we have our anniversary next month, I'll talk more about that. But hey, just a heads up, I am going to be gone for the next 3 weeks. I've got some other things I have to take care of. I won't go into detail on that, but we have some special surprises in store for you. And I've actually had a number of interviews that were an hour long and were very interesting. And so we were able to kind of repurpose those as a radio show, and you'll hear those interviews. And one was in India, one was here in this country, but I had entertained one atheist for 40 minutes as he was called into that show, and I was being challenged by. So anyway, I will not leave you as orphans for these 3 sessions that I'll be gone, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I'm just letting you know that. Now, coming up next weekend, of course, when I say next weekend, I mean just in a few days. The day after tomorrow, I climb on the plane. And I'll be flying with a bunch of the rest of our crew to Philadelphia for the reality there. It looks like we have basically 900 people of 1,000. So we're getting close to being full up, but there's still room. If you want to register, go to realityapologetics.com, and you can be part of that inaugural event there in Philly area in Pennsylvania. It's not right in Philly. It's in the outskirts somewhere, but the details are on that website, realityapologetics.com. And in Georgia, a month later, that would be April 22nd and 23rd, we have close to 400 people signed up of 1100. So we still got 5 weeks to go on that. But the room the seats are being taken. So just keep that in mind. Hope to see you at one or either of those events. I'm thinking about it. Somebody who lives kind of in, North Carolina could drive south to the one north to the one in Philly, and then 4 weeks later drive south to the one in Georgia. It's kind of within their circle of maybe 4 or 5 hours drive. Anyway, hope to see you there. Now, I recently got a note from someone that that is doing exactly what I described a few moments ago, and that is blooming where they're planted. All right. And sent me a note. He said, I'm sorry I can't make it to the Philly event this weekend. But he's doing a class. I have to get home and present on the topic, If God is Good, Why Evil? That actually is one of the breakouts that Trip Allman is going to be doing at Reality coming up. And he says he's in the middle of a session of a seminar that he's doing with two friends, and the seminar, he says, has proven an eye-opener for an audience of parents with K through 12 children. So he's working with adults, but they've never heard this stuff before. He says the indirect feedback has been incredibly positive, but one point that comes up often is this: why haven't we heard this stuff before? Now, this is a question that is classic, friends. It's frustrating to me. I'm glad when we get to go to do what we do for Stand to Reason. And others are doing it too, like this gentleman. His name is David. But it's frustrating because we're well received because people haven't heard this before. And so they're much more attentive to the issues because of that. But that's not a good thing. It's easy for us because we have more attentive people at our events, but it's sad because so few are doing it. This is David, by the way, is a graduate of CIA, Cross-Examine Instructor Academy, and later on in April, I'll have Frank Turek here. We'll be talking about CIA coming up in Cincinnati at the end of July this summer. This will be my 15th or 16th year with Frank doing this. So we'll talk more about this. But I wanted to mention this guy is an octogenarian. This guy, David, the CIA grad, is an octogenarian. That doesn't mean 8 years old. That means 80 years old plus. And he's teaching these classes and getting well received. He's blooming where he's planted, and he's meeting an incredible need. Okay? So I'm just saying, if you guys, whoever you are, if you have an opportunity to make a difference with something you've learned through Stand to Reason, even if you don't feel like really clever, professional, whatever, do what you can. It is in the process of doing it that you learn to do it better. All right? And if you can't do it, you can always have one of us come out. Whether it's John or Tim or Alan or Robbie, our new guy, or me, or Amy. Amy does stuff too. We'd like to come out to your place and teach what we can. It's really needed. Why haven't we heard this stuff before? It's because it hasn't been taught in your church before, but it ought to be, and that's why we're here. If you want to book a Stand to Reason speaker, it's easy. Booking at str.org. Booking at str.org. Darcy will respond, and she'll work it out. We try to make it happen if we can possibly do that, schedule-wise, financially, etc. So, but we have flexibility in both areas, and we want to work for you and for your local team. All right? I mentioned John Noyes. He's going to be live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube Wednesday, March 23rd. So that's coming up in 2 days. No, wait, that's tomorrow. So when you get this podcast, it'll be that day. He's going to be on at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That would be noon. And it's called To The Point Live, and you can catch it on those outlets, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. If you don't know where they are, go to str.org. our homepage. Scroll down to the bottom, and you can connect there. Alan Schleman is going to be at Carlton Oaks Baptist Church's Evangelism Seminar. This is in Santee, California. And he'll be there Saturday, April 2nd. That's the weekend after next, I guess. Amy Hall's going to be on Facebook on Wednesday, April 6th at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, doing a live Q&A Facebook. I just did one on Sunday. Amy Hall will be doing hers. Tim Barnett is going to be speaking at the Bridgepoint Fellowship Church in Texas on Sunday, April 10th. I don't know what it is. Let's see. I don't know what his topic is, but you can catch all this information if you go to our website. And there's a drop-down menu somewhere that tells you where we're at, all the details of that. We have 2 new Stand to Reason University courses coming up next month. They're going to cover the resurrection and biblical hermeneutics, never read a Bible verse kind of thing. Alan Schleman is teaching that one. I'm not sure who's doing the resurrection. Maybe it's Tim. But you can sign up today at https://training.str.org. That's too hard. Just go to str.org and look for training. Okay, it's a drop-down menu. You'll find it. And when Amy and I were doing our show, our STR Asks today, we ran out of questions. We did our full shows, but we were bottomed out. That means we need more questions from you. We love doing this. Amy's fabulous. All you have to do is write out a question in Twitter or tweet size in Twitter. You can even do it, I guess, on our website, like in a mail piece, but you want to keep it short. And make sure you put hashtag STRask, all one unit there, somewhere in your question, and it will get to Amy and we'll talk about it. Okay. So I have here in front of me a frustrating piece. And it has to do with the issue of abortion, but it's an aspect of pushback that is very, very popular in the culture today. And the pushback has to do with personal autonomy. No one should force me to do something with my body that I don't want to do, or maybe, depending on how this is characterized, something with my bodily organs that I don't want to use them for. That is a violation of my personal bodily rights. Now, I know Tim is working on a RPL for that, a TikTok that he's responding to. He'll do a great job. We went over some of the details yesterday. And I don't want to steal his fire, but I have another one that's similar to the one he's dealing with. And this is from a fairly well-known actress whose name I can't pronounce. So in saying that, you might know who that is, but I'm not even going to try. But it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter who the personality is. What matters, the message is more important than the messenger, all right? And in this case, we have to ask whether the message is sound or not. But I'm going to read what she's posted, and then I'm going to respond just a little bit to it, but I'm going to recommend a longer piece I wrote, 2,200 words. I can see the number here on the piece I printed out that's online that covers the bases. But I want to at least give you a feel for how responding to this kind of challenge works. And I will say right off the bat that this challenge really annoys me. It annoys me because in these cases, like this one I'm going to read, and the TikTok I watched last night that Tim is responding to, the people who are offering this argument against limiting abortion in any way, shape, or form are so, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this, are so taken with themselves and their point of view. Now, you can't dismiss an argument because the attitude someone has when they offer the argument. But the argument or the point of view or that what they offer in defense of abortion is really, really dangerous. It's bad thinking, and it sets a massively dangerous precedent, a point of view, a logical slippery slope. Logical slippery slope is when you agree to one line of thinking and another line of thinking is relevant to the first one in a significant way or a moral way, well, then the same thinking that applies to the first applies to the second. It's called a logical slippery slope. It's not a fallacy, okay? And what it not only the main point that's being made is bad, but what it trades on as a principle has ramifications for other things, making those things really bad too. Okay, that's the logical slippery slope element. Anyway, I'll read this to you and then make a few comments, then go to callers. Here's the thing, guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when life begins. It doesn't matter whether a fetus is a human being or not. That entire argument is a red herring, a distraction, a subjective and unwinnable argument that could not matter less. Okay, let me just pause for a moment. It does not matter whether a fetus is a human being. That's a distractive element. Oh, okay. But she continues and doubles down. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a fertilized egg or a fetus or a baby or a 5-year-old or a Nobel Prize-winning pediatric oncologist. Nobody has the right to use your body against your will, even to save their life or the life of another person. That's it. That's the argument, she writes. You cannot be forced to donate blood or marrow or organs, even though thousands die every year on waiting lists. They cannot even harvest your organ after your death without your explicit written pre-mortem permission. Denying women the right to abortion means we have less bodily autonomy than a corpse. Close quote. So there is the whole thing. Now, when confronted with the material here and the attitude and the forcefulness that it's offered, this sounds compelling. This is actually a very similar kind of argument that was more compellingly put, more carefully put, by a philosopher named Judith Jarvis Thomson more than 50 years ago in 1971, 2 years before Roe. It's called The Violinist Argument. It was titled, actually, A Defense of Abortion, and it was in the Journal of Philosophy and Public Affairs. I've written a piece on this called Unstringing the Violinist, where I itemize why this argument doesn't work. But I will tell you, when I heard Thompson's initial characterization of it, which was much more carefully done and much more sophisticated than this rougher characterization of it that I just read. And I don't know if this woman has ever read Thompson. I would be surprised if she did. But this bodily autonomy argument, I guess we could put it that way, is making the rounds more than ever today. And so I thought I'd give you some feedback and some things to think about. Now, I'll just say up front that I encourage you to go to our website, search for the solid ground titled Unstringing the Violinist, and you're going to get not only my response to Thompson, but my response to another individual, Eileen McDonough, who argues very similar. What Thompson argues is that you cannot be forced to have your body used to support another human being whose life depends on your body. Okay, and she gives an illustration that involves a world-famous violinist, and so that's why it's referred to informally as the violinist argument. Okay, McDonough takes it a step further. McDonough argues that you are always allowed to defend yourself against physical attack. And the way she reasons, a child that you don't want that is growing in your womb is like a parasite that is attacking you and taking from your body against your will, and therefore you have a moral right to use lethal force to repel the attack. Yeah, you got it right. The child is a parasite if the child is not wanted. It is a de facto parasite attacking the woman. She can defend herself with abortion. So those are the 2 points of view that I deal with in the paper, the article Unstringing the Violinist. It's only 2,200 words. It's not hard to go through, and a big section of that is the chunk out of Thompson's article that describes her argument in detail. Okay, this is basically the same thing, at least the Thompson version that we see in this post that I just read to you. Okay, nobody, reading again, has the right to use your body against your will, even to save their life or the life of another person. That's it. That's the argument. Now, a couple of observations. First of all, that's not an argument. That is a premise of an argument, but I guess she figures it's like the you understood in certain sentences. You understand the subject even though it's not listed, so you understand the rest of it. Nobody has the right to use your body against your will, even to save a life. Forcing someone to carry a baby to term is using your body against your will to save a life. Therefore, it's wrong, the baby's life in this particular case. All right. Now, first of all, and this is a point that I make in the article responding to Thompson, it's not entirely clear that this claim is actually true, that nobody has the right to use your body against your will even to save a life or the life of another person. I mean, you could probably think of circumstances where it's appropriate, given certain things at stake, to force somebody to act in a certain way for the goodwill of other people. In fact, this kind of thing is done all the time. Just think of when something terrible is happening and the police clear the area. I know this is a modest example. They clear the area. Okay, everybody out. You can't be here. Why? We're trying to take care of these people who are injured. Wait a minute. You are forcing me to move my body against my will in order to save another person's life? You can't do that. I have bodily autonomy. Well, that's different. Really? How is it different? If you cannot be forced to, nobody has the right to use your body against your will, even to save their life, well then, aren't they directing your body in some way? Well, they're not using my body to that extreme. Look, the bodily autonomy argument is an absolute argument. If you're going to offer exceptions, the exceptions are going to have to be qualified. Then why in this case are you allowed to use someone else's body? Well, that's because of other circumstances that are of greater moral weight than your claim to bodily autonomy. Well, I buy that, but then that means that this is not an absolute that can be used to absolutely justify abortion under any circumstance, which is the way it's being used here. And think of military conscription. People are conscripted into the military to fight. That means their body is being used against their will, in some cases to save other lives, protect us from enemies. And in this case, their life is on the line to save other lives, and they are being forced to do it. Now, of course, maybe the author here would say, well, I disagree with that too. But I think most people have this sense that there are obligations that we have to our community and to our country and to our families, minimally, country, community, families. I'm going smaller, closer, because it seems more obvious that the closer we get, the greater the responsibility that we have, and that sometimes we are obliged to relinquish our freedom for the good of another. And relinquishing our freedom, I'm speaking specifically of our bodily freedom. I could probably sit here and in an hour come up with 25 or 30 examples, so could you, where our bodily autonomy is restricted for the sake of others. I once was in LAX many years ago now, talking to a woman about this issue. We were both waiting for a flight, and she said, the government cannot force me to do what I want with my body. Same argument. I said, ma'am, when you walked across the tarmac here, or the driveway, and came into this building, the government slapped all kinds of laws on your body. And apparently you didn't complain at all. Now, this is pre-9/11. We got a whole bunch more laws that are slapped onto our bodies when we enter certain places, especially airports, okay? Of course, the government can restrict our bodily autonomy in certain circumstances. Now, it may not be legitimate to take somebody's organ from them, and that's one of the illustrations that's being used. But the broad principle of which taking an organ is an example is the bodily autonomy principle that she argues here, or at least asserts aggressively, is absolute. No matter if it's a fertilized egg you're talking about or a Nobel Prize-winning pediatric oncologist, you cannot force me to do something with my body to save that life. So what I've said so far is, it's not clear to me that that's actually true. But it is certainly clear to me that that isn't virtuous. Okay? It's certainly clear to me that that isn't virtuous. If I don't want to use my body even to save the life of a Nobel Prize-winning pediatric oncologist, that's somebody who cures cancer in kids or treats cancer in kids, that strikes me as an unbelievably self-centered point of view. Okay? And that's actually what this is, an unbelievably self-centered point of view. So it certainly is not virtuous. But I want you to, the broader question here, and this is the question that I press in my critique of Thompson and McDonough. This is an argument in a certain sense by parallel. All right? Here is a circumstance that is clearly inappropriate, forcing me to use my body to do something I don't want to do to save somebody else's life. All right? If that is completely inappropriate, then when that is applied to the issue of abortion, it is equally inappropriate. Okay? It is equally inappropriate. That is an argument based on a parallel. But it only works if the parallels are parallel in a morally meaningful way. And so I just jotted something down in the margin here. And this is one of the ways in which this is not like the way this woman is characterizing abortion. It is one thing to say you can't use my body for some other purpose against my will. And I've raised the issue. I'm not sure if that's actually even morally or ethically sound. But in this particular case, the woman's own body, let me put it this way, the way I wrote it down. Your own body is using your own body to produce another body, which is your own baby. Let me say this again so you don't miss it. Your own body, ma'am, It's your body. It isn't someone else forcing you. It is your body that is doing what your body was made to do. Produce another body, which is your own baby. And that point is all that's needed to demonstrate that the claims that were made in this piece have no bearing on the issue of pregnancy. Your own body is not being used by someone else. And as one had put it, my uterus, you're taking my uterus. No, a uterus doesn't make a baby. A mother makes a baby. The uterus is involved, but the uterus isn't being absconded with. It is the mother that's making the baby. The mother who's objecting is making the baby. Your own body is using your own body to produce another body, which is your baby. Okay? She says in her piece here, you cannot be forced to donate blood. Nobody's forcing you to donate blood. Your body is giving blood to that child. All your organs are working together to sustain this child your body is making. And the child is your child. And to point out one additional lack of parallel here, the only force, no one's forcing a woman to have the baby. The baby is happening automatically by the woman's own bodily functions. The only force that's being suggested here is the force being used to kill the baby. It is the force being used to kill the baby in abortion. And so that's why, in a way, this is another lack of parallel with the rest of the illustration. It's one thing to withhold care from a 5-year-old or a baby or a Nobel Prize-winning pediatric oncologist. It's another thing to go out and kill them, which is exactly what happens in an abortion. And incidentally, it is illegal to refuse to care for a newborn, just as a point of law. And that goes to the original claim. In case this person hadn't thought about it, parenthood does that. It makes a claim on a mother and a father's life that on behalf of their own children, that they legally do not have the liberty to ignore. It's called misfeasance or maybe malfeasance. Malfeasance is doing something wrong. Misfeasance is not doing something you ought to have done. You ought to care for your own children. And this is the ugly side of this, the other ugly step. If we buy this reasoning, then what it conveys, what comes along with it, if no one can force anyone, even regarding one's own child, doesn't matter whether the child's inside or outside, it's a child or a baby or a 5-year-old. It's in the piece. She said it. If one can't force them, then what are the parental responsibilities that mothers and fathers have regarding their children? What are they? They do not exist. This is the logical slippery slope. This abrogates a mother and a father of total responsibility of a child. So here's the moral principle. Mothers and fathers have moral obligations to their own children that are not sustained to children who are not their own. I'm not morally responsible for a kid across the town, but I'm morally responsible for Annabeth and Eva, my daughters. Not according to this particular piece, though. Nobody has a right to use your body against your will, even to save their life or the life of another person, which includes a fertilized egg, a fetus, or a baby, or a 5-year-old, or maybe a 14-year-old like Eva or a 17-year-old like Annabeth. Why not? Why must I be put out on behalf of them because I'm dead. That's why. This line of thinking destroys any vestige of moral responsibility that parents have for their children. That's the only way it can work. And that is the precise claim that's being made here, though the author has not applied it in this other case. It is the same line of reasoning. And so let me end with this, and it's in the piece that I wrote. Susan Smith shocked the nation with the murder of her children. She believed her 2 young boys were an obstacle to remarriage, so she placed them in her car, fastened their seatbelts, and drove them into a lake. Smith's crime was especially obscene because she violated the most fundamental moral obligation of all, the responsibility a mother has for her own children. Yet, wouldn't Susan Smith be exonerated by Thompson's and McDonough's, and also the author of this piece that I just read to you, their logic? These children were kidnappers and interlopers and trespassing on Smith's life, depriving her of liberty. Read here, bodily autonomy. Why not kill them? Those boys were attacking her. It was self-defense. That was McDonough's approach. But if they were just trespassing, or they're just making a demand on the liberty of their mother, which they were doing, and that's the approach of this piece I just wrote to you, then you have no obligation to care for them. Now, does that mean a liberty to kill them? It would have to mean that. You know why? This piece here I just read to you is a defense for abortion where a mother has her own unborn child killed. So let the parallel be a parallel. This argument I write is frightening for 2 reasons. First, it must reject the notion of parental responsibility in order to succeed. Second, in spite of that weakness, people in high places think it's compelling. The responsibility of a mother, and I cite a Supreme Court Justice here, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The responsibility of a mother has toward her child supersedes any claim she has to personal liberty. If it doesn't, if Thompson's and McDonough's argument and this woman's argument in the piece I read to you, if they succeed, then release Susan Smith. If parenthood is an act of heroism, if mothers have no moral obligation to the children they bear, if child rearing is a burden above and beyond the call of duty, then no child is safe in the womb or out. That's what it comes to. That's why I get so annoyed at these kinds of posts, because they're so ethically and rationally shallow. Yet they champion the absolute right for a mother to destroy her own child. And by the way, that's not just restricted in the womb. This logic would also apply equally out of the womb. That is the logical slippery slope. Check it out, Unstringing the Violinist, str.org, if you want more detail. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Stay with us. All right, time to go to calls. And let's start in Michigan, Marquette, Michigan, to be specific. Ben, isn't Marquette in the Upper Peninsula?
Yeah, it sure is.
It is. Okay, you're not too far from where I have my place in northern Wisconsin.
Yeah. I remember hearing you talk about that in your podcast. I'm glad you recognize that. That's super awesome. Yeah.
So what's on your mind, Ben?
Yeah. So quick little context. I'm a senior at Northern Michigan studying nursing, and I'm one of 4 guys in my cohort of 40. And a couple of my classmates who are girls just found out I'm waiting till marriage. I'm a Christian. And they were kind of like stunned by that. And they were asking me, why? And obviously, like, as a Christian, I feel like that's really easy to answer. You know, I want to obey God's word, and I want to honor him with my life and my decisions. But from like a to a non-believer, it wasn't, that wasn't a quick answer, right? So I'm guessing my question would be, how would you unpack the teaching of wait until marriage to a non-believer in a way that, I don't know, makes sense to them? Because to me, that I'm a Christian, it doesn't make sense to them.
Okay, the issue is the sexual ethic of Christianity, right? And with your non-Christian friends. Okay, good. Here's one way of looking at it. This is a general principle, and then we'll narrow it down. And the general principle is, when God gives us a command to do or not to do something, the command is for our good. And when I say for our good, what I mean is that God makes it in light of the way he made the world to accomplish human flourishing. So God made the world in a particular way so humans would flourish in that world. When we violate what God wants, then we are doing something that's going to actually hurt us in the long run. All right? Maybe not in the short run, but in the long run. So if we have a conviction that God's commandments are for our good, then we ought to be able, on reflection, to intuit what the good of the commandment was meant to accomplish, and then trade on that with someone who doesn't care about God. Okay? So take the one commandment, honor your father and your mother. And as I think it's Paul puts it, this is the first commandment with a promise. So it will be well with you. Okay? Well, this makes sense. If you rebel constantly against your parents, well, this is based on the presumption that they probably know more than a kid does. The kid is going to get himself into lots of trouble. If he obeyed his parents, never mind God, we got God out of the picture right now. If he obeyed his parents, his life is going to be better. So there's always going to be some balance or benefit to this. I once talked to a young man who was rebelling a lot against it, not Christian family. Well, I think the father was a Christian, but it wasn't a Christian environment. And he asked me to talk to his son. And I told the young man, I said, I know that it's hard responding to the authorities that your dad, for example, your parents want and all that. I get it, all right? But there will never be a time in your life when you will not have an authority over you. No matter where you live and what you do, you will always have an authority. If you're in the habit of rebelling against that authority, you're going to pay the price every single time you do that. This is not going to be a happy life. So notice I was speaking very pragmatically there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the broad principle. Now let's just go down to the specifics of sex. All right. There are disadvantages to being sexually active before you're married. Unfortunately, most of those disadvantages aren't experienced until further down the line, all right? People who are sexually active a lot before they're married have a harder time, I'm just speaking in generalizations now, have a harder time being celibate or being faithful to one spouse afterwards, all right? People who live together before they're married have a higher divorce rate after they're married, all right? People, it is very easy in sexual circumstances for a person to be taken advantage of, and the person that is almost always the one who suffers is the woman. Okay? She's the one who suffers, and she suffers emotional harm, all right? Because human beings were not built, just in general, to live a healthy life and be playing the field sexually and sleeping all around. That is, there is a natural impulse to that, especially strong in men. And this is why women characteristically have domesticated men. So they get married so they can experience their sexual appetites in some measure. But nowadays, we don't have that. And the
Okay.
ones who get hurt are the women. And they get hurt badly. I don't know if you recall the phrase, not sure if it's in operation that much anymore, but friends with benefits, right?
Oh, yeah, that's used today. Yep.
Okay. And there's lots of research that shows that in the relationship of friends with benefits, that means two people who have kind of a male and a female who have a mere friendship relationship, but still are sexually active with each other, doesn't bother the guy hardly at all. It ruins the girl. Over time, the gal gets really, really messed up. All right. So I don't know that this is going to appeal to your guy friends who want to be sexually active because they don't suffer as much. But I think that the suffering they still are going to experience in the long run. If you want to have a healthy life, then don't mess around. Court somebody, whatever, date, then have sex after you're married. It'll be more stable, it'll be more satisfying, and you won't get messed up. STDs would disappear if people practice that, okay? All of the problems associated with single parenthood where women get pregnant, and then don't have the help of the husband. There's, which is, I should say, the father. Those would all be avoided. But there are all kinds of broken families and broken relationships and broken people because of what happens when people are illicit in their sexual behavior. Here's the problem with all of those things I said. People who are young can't see it. I'm trying to think of a nice way to play it. Young and dumb, they can't see this. They are looking right in front of their eyes, just like I did when I was 20 and 21 and 22, and we don't see the consequences of our behavior. But my wife was a single mom, okay? And then we adopted 2 children from crisis pregnancies, okay? It's not ideal. They get a family, okay, us, but still, it's not ideal. That's all I can tell you. And people know this. There's all kinds of hardships that are involved, and sometimes it's single mom is just a single mom, and then other members of the family are brought in, and moms can do great in circumstances like that, and so can the kids, but it's not ideal.
Okay.
Moms need dads, and children need moms and dads. Okay, so and this is why, apart from the Bible, societies have learned how things work, and that's why socially they've discouraged this kind of behavior because they know the troubles it causes. It's the wisdom of the ages. Now, the wisdom of the ages is there because people made bad decisions, and they figured out in cultural terms how to make better decisions, and their cultural norms then that influenced their behaviors, and that's what young people want to break away from. Cultural norms. You're not telling me what to do. Okay, well, you sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And then when they're reaping the whirlwind, everybody else around them's got to reap that same whirlwind too, because the consequences of a person's actions are not limited to them.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's some of the stuff there. I wrote a booklet, and I don't know, do we still sell this? It's called something about waiting till marriage. What is the name of this? The little purple.
Try before you buy.
Try before you buy. Thank you, Kyle. Try before you buy ? Try before you buy ? And do we still have that? Do we sell that on our book?
I don't think we sell the book. But
okay, we don't.
But the article's on the store or on the website.
Okay, the article's on the website. We don't sell the booklet anymore in the store. But then I try to go through some of those things. And I wrote this when I was still single. And I was 25 years celibate as a Christian. So, I had a kind of secondary virginity, or whatever you want to call it. And it's reflecting. I'm looking at what Scripture says and also looking at the consequences of this behavior in people's lives.
Okay.
There is so much damage that is caused in people's lives because of sexual promiscuity and its natural consequences. All right?
Okay.
Even if you try, we'll get an abortion so we don't have to worry about the natural consequences. Well, you just killed a baby. That's a matter of fact. And even if you don't believe you killed a baby or it's justifiable to kill a baby, like the woman was arguing in the piece I just read, you still have a death on your hands. And women don't walk away from that easily. There's PTSD kind of things associated with abortion, I guarantee you, although the whole field wants to ignore that. And who suffers? The woman. And possibly others around the woman. Maybe the dad, maybe grandma and grandpa, maybe others, aunts and uncles, or would-be aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa. But the damage goes all over. And this is something nobody wants to acknowledge. So I guess what I would tell my friends is, who are not Christian, I'd say, look, if you're smart and you want to have a long, happy life, happy, satisfied relationship with a woman, follow these rules. And you will be much more satisfied than all these fly-by-night things that you're involved in. I guarantee you. And the statistics bear this out. So that's you got to appeal pragmatically. But we can do so because we have this confidence that when God provides a boundary, he does so for a reason. And the reason is for our good. Okay?
Awesome. Yeah.
Incidentally, since we're just right at the end of the hour, I don't have enough time this hour to go to another caller. I just want to read something from 1 Peter that I actually read quite frequently. 1 Peter chapter 3, and 1 Peter chapter 3, and let me find it here. It says, Paul makes a summary about living together. He doesn't mention sex here, but he says, to sum up, all of you, be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead, for you're called to inherit a blessing. And then he quotes the Old Testament. Here's what it says here. The one who desires life, to love and see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. All right? So there's a principle there. You want a good life. You want life and to love and to see good days. I love the wording here, and he's citing verse 10 here from Psalm 70. Make that Psalm 34. All right? You want love? You want real love? You want good life? You want good days and length of days? All right, here's how you get it. Be good to live good. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Okay? And it's just a recipe. It's a recipe. It's common sense, really, but there's unfortunately common sense is not very common nowadays.
Yeah, you're telling me. Yep.
So that's what I would recommend. That there is a pragmatic element in the commands God gives, and you will benefit from the pragmatic consequences if you do it, even if you don't know God. All right. So that's kind of the way I'd go. But of course, the best thing is to know God, because keeping these things is not always easy, and it's good to have some help.
Amen to that.
Make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it.
Okay, Ben in Marquette, Michigan, I appreciate your call, and looking forward to my own trip up there in a couple of months, up in that neck of the woods. It is woods, too, and it's beautiful. Simply put, God knows best. I know it's hard to let that be your guiding principle, especially if you're not a Christian, but God knows how the world works. He made it. He knows how human beings function best. He wants human flourishing. He gives commands for our good. And even if we're not Christians, if we follow them, then we operate according to the way God made the world and humans as well, and we will do better. Of course, the best, of course, is to, do the right thing for the right reason to bring honor to God. All right, that's it for this hour, friends. Greg Koukl for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven. Bye-bye.